Nearly 3 decades after the tragic crash that took John Denver's life, new words from his widow have brought the story back into the spotlight in a way no one expected. For years, the official reports seemed to answer most of the questions, but some details have always left people wondering if there was more to the story. Join us as we break down her statement and uncover what was finally revealed after all these years. John Denver. John Denver was born as Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. in Roswell, New Mexico. From the very beginning, his life was shaped by movement and change. His father served in the United States Air Force, which meant the family rarely stayed in one place for long. They moved from base to base across the country, and each new location brought a new school, new faces, and a new environment for young John to adjust to. This constant relocation made it hard for him to feel settled. While other kids built long friendships, John often had to start over again. Over time, this gave him a quiet, reflective personality. He spent a lot of time observing his surroundings and trying to find a sense of home wherever he was. That search for belonging would later become a strong theme in his music. One of the most important early influences in his life was music itself. When he was young, his grandmother gave him a guitar. That simple gift changed everything. He taught himself how to play, spending hours practicing and learning songs. Music became a place where he could express what he was feeling, especially the emotions he found hard to say out loud. It also gave him comfort during times when life felt unstable. As he grew older, those feelings of not quite belonging stayed with him. Moving so often made it difficult for him to feel rooted anywhere. This personal experience later shaped the emotional tone of many of his songs, especially those about home, nature, and finding peace in simple places. When he later entered the music world, he made a key decision that helped shape his identity. He changed his name from Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. to John Denver. He chose Denver after the capital city of Colorado, a place he admired deeply. The new name was simpler, easier to remember, and better suited for his stage career. During his early years, he was strongly influenced by folk music, country sounds, and traditional American storytelling songs. These styles focused on real-life emotions and everyday experiences, which matched his personality and writing style. He was drawn to songs that felt honest and natural, rather than overly produced or artificial. John attended Texas Tech University, where he studied architecture. However, he never felt fully committed to that path. Music remained his true passion. After some time, he made the difficult decision to drop out of college and fully pursue a career in music. It was a risky move, but he believed it was the right one. He eventually moved to Los Angeles, hoping to break into the music industry. But the early days were not easy. Like many aspiring musicians, he faced rejection and uncertainty. He struggled to find steady work and recognition. Still, he kept writing songs, performing whenever he could, and slowly building connections in the industry. These early struggles helped shape his determination. Even though success was not immediate, he continued pushing forward, believing in his music and his voice. And soon, those quiet beginnings in Los Angeles would lead him into a turning point that changed everything. Entry into music. John Denver's real entry into the professional music world began when he joined the Chad Mitchell Trio. He came in as a replacement member after Chad Mitchell himself left the group. At that time, the trio was already well known in the folk music scene, so stepping into that role gave Denver an important chance to learn from experienced musicians and perform on bigger stages. Being part of the group helped him grow quickly. He had to adapt to touring schedules, live performances, and tight vocal harmonies. This experience gave him confidence as a performer and helped him understand how to connect with audiences. It also pushed him to improve his songwriting. While performing other people's material, he started thinking more seriously about writing his own songs that reflected his own voice and feelings. By the late 1960s, Denver began moving toward a solo career. He felt ready to express himself more directly through his own music. Leaving the group was a major step, but it allowed him to focus on developing his identity as a singer-songwriter. This period was not easy, as he was no longer backed by an established group, but it gave him creative freedom. During this early solo phase, he wrote several songs that started gaining attention in folk music circles. His writing style was simple, emotional, and honest. He focused on everyday themes like love, nature, and personal reflection. These songs were not yet major commercial hits, but they helped him build a strong reputation among folk music listeners and industry professionals. One of the biggest turning points in his early career came with the song "Leaving on a Jet Plane." Denver wrote the song while still relatively unknown, and it later became a massive success when recorded by Peter, Paul, and Mary. Their version turned the song into a #1 hit, and it brought Denver widespread attention as a songwriter. Suddenly, people across the music industry knew his name, even if they did not yet know his voice. This success opened many doors for him. Soon after, he signed with RCA Records, which gave him the platform he needed to fully launch his solo career. With RCA, he was able to shape his sound more clearly and release music under his own name. This was an important step in building his identity as John Denver, the solo artist, rather than just a member of a group or a behind-the-scenes songwriter. As his career developed, he started to stand out in the growing folk-country crossover scene. His music combined soft folk storytelling with country-style melodies, making it appealing to a wide audience. He was not trying to fit into one strict genre. Instead, he blended styles in a way that felt natural to him, and listeners responded to that honesty. By the end of this period, John Denver was no longer just an aspiring musician trying to be noticed. He had become a recognized name in songwriting and was steadily building the foundation for major stardom. And soon, that foundation would turn into a level of fame that changed his life completely. The breakthrough. John Denver's rise to stardom began in a strong and steady way with the release of his album Poems, Prayers, and Promises in 1971. This album marked a turning point in his career. It introduced his music to a much larger audience and showed that his soft, emotional style of songwriting could also succeed in the mainstream music world. The album did not rely on heavy production or complex arrangements. Instead, it focused on simple lyrics and clear melodies that people could easily connect with. Around this time, some of his most famous songs were either released or became widely known. Take Me Home, Country Roads quickly became one of his signature songs. It captured a strong feeling of longing for home and simple living, and it connected deeply with listeners across the United States. Sunshine on My Shoulders also became very popular with its calm and reflective tone. Another major hit, Rocky Mountain High, became closely linked to his identity, especially his connection to the state of Colorado. These songs helped shape how people saw John Denver. He became strongly associated with nature, open landscapes, and a peaceful way of life. Colorado, in particular, played a big role in his image. He spent a lot of time there, and the state's mountains and natural beauty influenced much of his music. Over time, this connection became one of the most important parts of his artistic identity. As his popularity grew, John Denver began appearing more often on television. These appearances helped him reach audiences who may not have been familiar with folk or country music. His calm personality and friendly presence made him appealing to a wide range of viewers. He was not just a radio artist, he became a familiar face in American homes. His success was also reflected in awards, record sales, and global tours. His albums sold millions of copies, and he performed in large venues around the world. He became one of the top-selling artists of the 1970s, with a level of popularity that placed him among the biggest names in music at the time. His concerts were often filled with audiences who knew every word of his songs. One of the most notable parts of his rise was his public image. While much of the 1970s music scene was known for rebellion and controversy, John Denver was seen as calm, clean, and family-friendly. His image stood in contrast to many of his peers, and this helped him reach audiences who preferred more traditional and peaceful music. During this period, he also expanded into acting and television specials. He appeared in films and hosted TV programs that featured his music and personality. These projects helped him stay visible beyond the music charts and added another layer to his career. By the peak of his success, John Denver had become one of the most commercially successful artists of his decade. His music was everywhere, from radio stations to television specials, and his songs had become part of everyday life for many people. And just as his fame reached its highest point, his personal life and passions began taking him in a different direction: the aviation interest. John Denver's personal life was closely tied to his public success, but it also came with challenges that were not always visible to the outside world. One of the most important parts of his life was his marriage to Annie Martell. The two married in 1967 before he reached major fame, and they later adopted 2 children. This family life meant a lot to him, and he often tried to keep it grounded, even as his career became more demanding. However, balancing fame with personal relationships was not easy. As his music career grew, so did his travel schedule, public appearances, and time away from home. The pressure of constant touring and attention began to create distance in his personal life. Even though he cared deeply about his family, the demands of his career often pulled him in different directions. Over time, this became one of the most difficult parts of his life. To cope with the pressure of fame, John Denver increasingly turned to nature. He spent more time in quiet places, especially in the mountains and rural areas he loved. These retreats gave him space away from crowds and attention. Being outdoors helped him feel more relaxed and more like himself. This connection to nature was not just part of his music, it was also part of how he lived. In the late 1970s, another major interest began to grow in his life: aviation. Flying became something he was deeply fascinated with. At first, it started as a hobby, but over time it became a serious passion. He was drawn to the feeling of being in the sky and the independence it gave him. For someone who spent so much time under public attention, flying offered a rare sense of privacy and control. As his interest grew, he began acquiring his own aircraft. Over time, he owned several small planes, including personal and experimental models. He did not pursue aviation as a full professional career, but he invested time and effort into learning how to fly them safely. He became a recreational pilot and spent many hours in the air whenever his schedule allowed. One of the most important parts of his aviation journey was his experience with experimental aircraft. These were smaller, custom-built planes that required careful handling and a good understanding of their systems. He enjoyed flying them, but they also required constant attention and knowledge of their unique designs. Even though he was not a military or commercial pilot, he continued building his flying experience over the years. For John Denver, flying was more than just a hobby. It became a personal escape from the pressure of fame. When he was in the air, he was away from the expectations of the public and the constant attention that came with being a famous musician. It gave him a sense of peace and separation from his busy life on the ground. This growing passion for aviation would later become a defining part of his final years, leading him toward a path that would change everything. And eventually, this love for flying would bring him face to face with a moment that no one expected: transition from fame. During the 1980s, John Denver's career began to shift as music trends changed. The popularity of soft folk and country-influenced pop started to decline in the mainstream charts. New styles like rock, pop rock, and electronic sounds were becoming more dominant. Because of this, Denver was not appearing on the top charts as often as he had in the 1970s. His biggest radio hits became less frequent, and his commercial peak slowly began to fade. Even with this change, he never disappeared from music. His concerts continued to draw strong audiences, especially in places where his older songs still held deep meaning for fans. Many people still connected strongly with his earlier work, and he remained a respected live performer. Touring became an important part of his career, even when radio success was not as strong as before. At the same time, John Denver began focusing more on environmental activism and humanitarian work. He cared deeply about nature, conservation, and protecting the environment. He supported several causes related to wildlife, clean air, and land preservation. He also took part in charity efforts and international humanitarian projects. These activities became an important part of his identity beyond music. His passion for aviation also continued to grow during this period. He kept flying regularly and expanded his collection of aircraft over time. Flying was something he stayed committed to, even as his music career changed. It remained one of his main personal interests and a way for him to spend time away from public attention. Later in his life, he relocated to California. This move gave him easier access to coastal flying routes and airports. The coastal environment also gave him new flying experiences over ocean and shoreline areas. He spent more time flying small aircraft along the California coast, which became a regular part of his routine. Even though his chart success had slowed, John Denver maintained a steady public presence. He continued to appear in concerts, television programs, and special performances. His image as a well-known American singer was still strong, and he remained recognizable to audiences both in the United States and internationally. He was no longer at the very top of the music industry in terms of sales, but he was still active and respected. Over time, public perception of him also began to change slightly. As music trends evolved, newer artists took center stage in popular culture. However, John Denver was still viewed as a classic figure from an earlier era of music. His songs continued to be played and appreciated, even as the industry moved in new directions. During this phase of his life, recreational flying became even more important to him. It was not just a hobby anymore. It was a key part of how he spent his personal time. Flying gave him a sense of independence and quiet that he could not always find in his public life. He often used it as a way to step away from the demands of touring and public appearances. As the 1990s approached, his focus on flying remained steady, and it would soon play a central role in the final chapter of his life. And what happened next would come during one of these very flights when everything suddenly changed: the final days. In the summer of 1997, John Denver was spending more time in California, especially around the Monterey Bay area. His schedule was lighter compared to earlier years, and he used this period to relax, continue performing occasionally, and focus on personal interests. Flying remained one of his main activities, and he was still very active as a recreational pilot during this time. During this period, he made the decision to fly a recently acquired experimental aircraft. The plane was a home-built design known as a Rutan Long-EZ type aircraft, Rutan Long-EZ. This type of aircraft was small, lightweight, and built for efficiency and long-range flight. It was not a standard commercial plane, and it required careful handling and familiarity with its unique design. The aircraft itself had a complex ownership and usage history before Denver flew it. Like many experimental planes, it had been modified over time by different builders and pilots. One of the important technical aspects of this aircraft was its fuel system, which required attention during operation. Refueling and fuel management were critical in this type of design, since even small mistakes in fuel selection or switching could affect engine performance. John Denver had a solid amount of flying experience, but much of it was in general recreational aircraft rather than highly customized experimental designs like this one. He was licensed and capable, but the Long-EZ had certain systems and cockpit layouts that were different from what he was most familiar with. This meant that even experienced pilots needed time to fully adjust to its specific controls and positioning. Before the flight, standard preparations were made, including checking the aircraft, reviewing basic flight conditions, and planning the route. He was flying from the Monterey Bay area, a location he had used before for coastal flights. The area was known for its scenic views, but also required attention due to changing coastal conditions. Weather conditions on the day of the flight were generally considered manageable for visual flying. Visibility over the coast can change, but there were no extreme warnings that would have prevented a short recreational flight. Still, coastal air conditions can shift quickly, and pilots often need to stay alert to subtle changes in wind and light. In the final moments before takeoff, Denver followed routine pre-flight steps. He prepared the aircraft, completed standard checks, and made sure everything was ready for departure. These actions were part of his usual flying habits, which he had repeated many times before. Nothing about the preparation suggested anything unusual or out of the ordinary at the time. He then proceeded with the flight from the Monterey Bay Area Airport, beginning what was intended to be a short personal trip along the coast. It was meant to be a routine flight, something he had done many times during his years as a pilot. At that moment, it was simply another flight in a long history of time spent in the air, with no indication of how quickly the situation would develop into something far more serious. And once he was airborne, events began unfolding in a way that no one could have expected: the crash. On October 12, 1997, John Denver took off from Monterey Peninsula Airport in California for what was expected to be a short recreational flight. The weather conditions were considered generally suitable for flying under visual flight rules, and there was nothing at the time that suggested any immediate danger. The flight began normally, with Denver piloting the experimental aircraft himself. After takeoff, he followed a path over the coastline near the Pacific Ocean. This area was familiar to him from earlier flights. He was flying a Rutan Long-EZ type experimental aircraft, a lightweight plane designed for efficiency and long-range travel. The aircraft was capable of smooth flight when properly managed, but it also required careful attention to fuel and control systems. For a short period after departure, everything appeared normal. The plane stayed on course along the Monterey Bay area, and there were no immediate signs of distress reported from the ground. However, shortly afterward, something went wrong in the air. The aircraft began to lose control, and its flight path became unstable. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing the plane make unusual movements over the water. Some described it as a sudden change in direction and a steep descent. The aircraft then dropped rapidly toward Monterey Bay. There was very little time between the loss of control and the impact. The descent happened quickly, leaving almost no opportunity for recovery. The plane struck the water in Monterey Bay with significant force. Because of the speed and angle of the impact, the aircraft was destroyed on contact. The lightweight structure of the experimental design broke apart immediately upon hitting the surface. There was no surviving intact structure of the plane after the crash. Almost immediately after the accident, search and rescue operations were launched. Local authorities, including the Coast Guard and emergency response teams, began searching the area where the aircraft was believed to have gone down. Debris was soon located floating in the water, confirming the crash site. The search effort continued as teams worked to recover wreckage and locate the pilot. Recovery operations were carefully carried out over the following hours. Pieces of the aircraft were brought in for examination, and investigators began piecing together what had happened. The identification process confirmed that the aircraft belonged to John Denver. Personal and aircraft registration records helped authorities verify the identity quickly. The official confirmation of a fatal outcome came after the recovery of wreckage and the absence of any signs of survival. The news was then communicated to family members and relevant authorities through standard notification procedures. It was handled as a formal accident investigation case, with multiple agencies involved in documenting the event. Refueling and fuel management were critical in this type of design. Routine personal flight. The calm conditions before takeoff contrasted sharply with the rapid chain of events that followed in the air and on the water. And as investigators began looking deeper into the cause, questions quickly formed about what exactly went wrong in those final moments. The investigation. After the crash, the investigation into John Denver's accident was led by the National Transportation Safety Board, the agency responsible for studying civil aviation accidents in the United States. Their job was to carefully examine every detail of the flight, the aircraft, and the conditions to understand exactly what caused the crash. The investigators began by looking closely at the aircraft itself. This was not a standard factory-built aircraft. It was a home-built experimental design, which means it could include modifications made by different owners over time. Because of this, investigators paid special attention to its design history, maintenance records, and any changes made to its systems. One of the most important areas of focus was the fuel system. The Long-EZ design has a fuel selector system that controls which tank feeds fuel to the engine. In this aircraft, the fuel selector was located in a position that required the pilot to reach behind and down from the normal seated position. Investigators found that this placement made it difficult to access quickly during flight, especially in situations where immediate adjustment was needed. Another key factor was the pilot seat modification. The seat had been adjusted in a way that improved comfort but reduced forward reach. This meant that certain controls, including the fuel selector, were harder to reach than in the original design. Investigators noted that this combination of seat position and control placement created a situation where quick fuel management was more difficult than it should have been. Human factors also played an important role in the investigation. John Denver was a licensed and experienced recreational pilot, but much of his flying experience was not in experimental aircraft like the Long-EZ. These types of aircraft can behave differently from standard general aviation planes, and they require familiarity with specific systems and cockpit layouts. Investigators considered how this difference in experience may have affected his ability to respond quickly during the flight. Importantly, the investigation found no evidence of a mechanical failure in the engine or airframe that caused the crash. The aircraft itself was not considered to have suffered a sudden technical breakdown. Instead, the focus shifted toward how the aircraft was operated and how its design interacted with pilot actions during flight. The final conclusion pointed to fuel starvation as the main cause of the accident. Fuel starvation occurs when the engine does not receive a continuous supply of fuel, even if fuel is still available on board. In this case, the placement of the fuel selector and the difficulty in reaching it, combined with the aircraft's configuration, likely led to an interruption in fuel flow during flight. This resulted in engine power loss and the subsequent loss of control. As part of their findings, the NTSB issued safety recommendations related to experimental aircraft design. These recommendations focused on improving cockpit ergonomics, especially the placement of critical controls like fuel selectors. They also highlighted the importance of ensuring that modifications to seats or controls do not reduce a pilot's ability to operate essential systems quickly and safely. The investigation helped clarify that the accident was not caused by a single simple failure, but by a combination of design choices, human factors, and operational conditions that came together at a critical moment. And with those findings, the full picture of the final flight began to come into focus, raising even more questions.